way.
Until at last,
now we can be still and rest and pile up our straw into a warm, cozy nest.
Then the sparrows chirped.
The straw is ours if we don't care who else is cold, because we don't share.
and the sparrows nestled down in their nests near the roof of the little stable.
But this dark black night,
Didn't stay dark and black,
was the moon came up,
round and white,
and very proud,
and very full,
so full that it out-twinkled the tiny stars.
and filled the field with shadows. But
Then
then something else came up. Something new.
Something different.
Something that the 4 cows who were lazily munching their midnight cuds
Never,
ever expected.
Oh my.
Said the cows as they looked up high above them.
And saw that the moon was going to have to share the sky with the biggest,
The brightest.
the whitest star that these cows had ever seen.
That is the whitest star I have ever seen.
All of them just stood there, swishing their tails and staring at that huge, beautiful Bethlehem star.
Until finally, they just looked at one another and said,
We shake our heads. We don't know what to say. Seen many, many things, but never a star so bright. It turns night into day.
And the cows put their heads together to think about this very strange star shining above them.
This just ain't right. It's not day, it's still night. We know our role. We know what should and should not be. So we're just gonna pretend that we don't see.
So the cows closed their eyes,
Shut down their hearts
turned off their brains,
and lowered their heads and continued to munch.
not paying any attention at all to the huge, bright star that outshone the sun.
That seemed to hover right above the little stable,
With each passing minute, the star grew brighter and brighter,
lighting up the lakes
and streams
and forests.
and fields.
The huge star burned so brightly in the sky
That the sheep who were bunched together on the hillside looked up,
sat up,
stood up,
and walked in a huge circle in the pasture.
and the sheep were amazed, as only sheep could be amazed.
I think I'm amazed.
Well, if you're amazed, then I'll be amazed too.
Well, if you're both amazed, then I'm sure I'm amazed too.
Maybe I'm just more than amazed. Maybe I'm spellbound. Well, if you're spellbound, then I'll be spellbound too.
Well, if you're both spellbound, then I'm spellbound 3.
I'll be spellbound. You will. I will be spellbound.
I will if you both will be.
And the sheep circled for a long, long time.
Hoping that one of them would decide whether they should be amazed or spellbound.
Maybe we should go see what's there. I'll go. We all go. That's only fair.
So they all started off down through the pasture toward the little Bethlehem stable where the star was shining.
I can't go first. I can't lead us here. One of you go first. I'll bring up the rear.
So each of the sheep started following the other sheep.
Each sheep thinking and hoping that the other sheep would lead the way.
And they followed.
And they followed.
And they followed.
Until at last, they just sat down to rest and hoped that one of the others would lead them toward the star.
And they sat wide-eyed and wondering, watching the star and listening to the silence.
After a while, the sheep saw a donkey trudging toward the little stable.
His head hung down so low.
His tail swishing slowly.
His tired feet hardly lifting off the ground from step to step.
I've clip-clopped and I've clop-clapped, miles and miles from morning till night. I've used up all my might.
Said the exhausted little donkey.
Joseph walked beside me with Mary on my back, but Mary's gonna have a baby, so she's like a double-sized pack.
The poor tired little donkey stopped and shook his head sadly.
Poor Joseph and Mary, they can't find anywhere to stay, but I know where I'm going, the stable in a big pile of hay.
For a minute, the donkey stopped and turned around and looked back at the town where Joseph and Mary were going door to door, looking for some place to spend the night.
But each door slammed shut very tight, people saying,
We are full. This is the busy time of year. We're full up and bursting. There's no room here. Don't stop here. Just keep moving around. You'll be lucky to find a place. In the whole Bethlehem town.
I should go back and get them. They don't know where to go, but I'm too tired and my feet hurt me so.
So the little donkey thought about his sore feet and kept walking toward the stable that had the bright, beautiful star perched on top.
Joseph was tired too.
And Mary knew she needed to find some place warm and safe.
So when the last innkeeper said,
I'm sorry, there's no room in this inn, but if you really want to, you're welcome to spend this cold windy night out there in the stable.
Joseph just said thank you.
and helped Mary down the starlit road toward the stable.
But then the little mice who had spent all night long gathering cheese and grain saw the donkey.
And Mary,
And Joseph.
walking toward the stable door.
All the little mice could think about was how different and strange the humans and donkeys looked.
Because you see, the little mice only liked other little mice.
They don't like strange other kind of creatures like humans and donkeys.
No, 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 no. Stay away, stay away. Find some other place to stay.
The little mice didn't think about how cold it was outside.
Or how tired Joseph and Mary and their poor donkey were after traveling all day.
All they could think about was how different the humans were.
So they grabbed their little paws together to form a wall and shouted once again in their little voices.
You're not mice, so you're not nice. You're not mice, so you're not nice.
But still, Joseph and Mary and the donkey kept coming.
So the little mice hurried and scurried as fast as mice legs could run.
And gathered up all the cheese and grain.
And hid it. They didn't want to share their grain with that tired, hungry donkey.
They didn't want to share the cheese with the tired and hungry humans.
They didn't want to share anything with anyone that wasn't a mouse.
As Joseph opened the rough wooden stable door to bring Mary in,
A cold blast of wind raced through the stable.
ruffling the feathers off the doves quietly sleeping in the rafters.
How crude, how rude, how awfully inconsiderate. The doves cooed harshly. Don't they understand? We are the best birds in the land. And when you're the best, we need our beauty rest.
And the doves stared smugly down the delicate beaks at Joseph and Mary, still shivering in the doorway.
They need to learn a thing or two about what to do and not to do. And disturbing our evening slumber is an unforgivable blunder. As Joseph shut the door and hoped Mary to lie down in the straw, the doves whispered, "They're not of our social set. In fact, they're probably in debt. For us to be in company so base is a humiliating disgrace."
And the doves turned the pink beaks skyward and huffed and snorted and stared at the strangers.
Joseph slowly set down his little pack down.
And unrolled 2 blankets.
He used one blanket to soften the small bunch of rough straw into a bed for Mary.
And the other one to drape over her to help keep the chilly night wind that whistled through the splintered cracks in the stable walls.
And for several shivering moments, all the stable became very silent and very, very still.
The sparrows peered from the rafters, listening.
The mice strained quietly from tiny corners.
The doves watched unmoving from the eaves.
The cows stopped munching.
And the sheep stopped circling.
Even the donkey lifted his head and flipped his ears forward, watching and waiting.
Outside the stable, the little stars stopped twinkling as if straining their bright eyes to see clearly.
And the north wind stopped blowing as if holding its chilling breath, waiting to see what was about to happen.
In fact, for the first and only moment since God made the universe,
Everyone and everything in God's wonderful creation stopped what they were doing.
and listened and looked toward that little stable in Bethlehem,
Only Joseph moved.
holding Mary and cradling her head and soothing her.
And as Mary cried softly, the huge star that hovered above the stable got even bigger.
So big that outshined the moon, the stars, and the daytime sun, whipping out all the darkness.
And turning every shadow on the earth into light.
In that instant, as the world listened and waited, God fulfilled his most glorious promise.
In that instant, the baby Jesus,
God's very own Son,
the Savior of the entire universe, was born to Mary.
and Mary wrapped the baby in swaddling cloths and laid him very gently in a manger of straw.
And the only sound in the whole wide world was the baby Jesus, cooing softly in the straw-filled bed.
All of a sudden, high overhead, above the stable,
High above the pastures where the sheep stood transfixed,
the heavens opened.
a chorus of shimmering and shining angels proclaimed,
Glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace and goodwill to men.
The little mice heard the angels first and scurried from the stable corners to see what God's very own Son looked like.
And after seeing the little baby, the mice turned to the sparrows peeking out from the shadowy rafters and said,
Joseph and Mary need to eat. Let's bring cheese for their tummies and warm straw for their feet.
And the little mice gathered their straw and cheese to share with the baby, Jesus.
And the sparrows flapped down to gaze into the manger.
And as the sparrows watched the baby Jesus shivering in the cold, the sparrows looked at the cows and said, Jesus' manger is cold and bare. He needs to know that we care. Let's bring our feathers and more straw because we want to share.
And the sparrows fluttered around the manger, filling the simple wooden trough with warm feathers and more straw.
The sheep straggled slowly down the hill to the stable and nestled next to the cows to stare at the baby Jesus through the stable window.
And the cows chewed and thought and chewed until finally the cows turned to the gentle sheep and said,
We can't turn our heads and pretend not to see. The baby is God's greatest gift, given for you and for me. And the cows lumbered into the stable to share their warmth with Joseph and Mary.
And the sheep looked at one another, then looked at baby Jesus.
And for several brief moments, the sheep forgot to ask each other what to do.
We see God's Son so tiny and so cold.
And each sheep let itself into the stable and the tiny baby Jesus to help keep them warm.
Only the doves and donkeys still cowered in the stables, pale shadows.
The doves saw the sparrow's feathers, the mice's cheese, and the sheep and the cows all cuddled tightly around the shivering family. And the doves said,
We feel so ashamed after what we have done. We've given nothing to anyone, yet God's given us his only Son. So the dove swooped down, perched on the manger rail, and cooed the most beautiful lullaby that doves could coo to help Mary and Joseph and the baby and all the animals to sleep.
Now only the donkey stood by himself,
Still very, very tired.
still very, very cold.
Then slowly the donkey trudged his tired hooves over to see the sleeping animals and people.
Then the donkey said,
I'm still so tired after all the traveling I've done. They're all resting and sleeping. Looks like I'll get none. Someone has to stand guard until first morning's light, so I'll keep watch with the star this long, silent night.
And
that's what the
donkey did.